Good morning, Chapel Cross, and all who are gathering for Thursday morning Bible class. Sorry I couldn't be with you last week. We had a pastors' conference here in St. Charles, and I needed to be there. So we took a week off. 2 weeks ago, we had Genesis 23, the text where Sarah dies, and Abraham buys a plot of land in the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre, and then there's a cave, and that's where he buries his beloved Sarah, who lived 127 years. So how old is Abraham? He's 10 years older than Sarah, so he's 137 years. And now, of all time, he is looking for a wife for his son Isaac. So how old is Isaac? Well, Isaac has to at least be 37 years old because Abraham was 100 and Sarah was 90 when Isaac was born. So chapter 24, Abraham makes a plan to find a wife for Isaac. And this is an important thing. It's not just about Isaac getting married. It's about the promise. If you remember the promise, what's the promise? The promise is that God would bless all nations through Abraham and Sarah's offspring. So if Isaac doesn't find a wife and have kids, then the promise ends with Isaac. You might as well sacrifice him back in chapter 22. We're not advocating child sacrifice. But the point is, Isaac is a special child. He is an important child. He is the child of the promise. And so it's interesting. He's the only one from the family. It's not like there's 10 or 12 sons. It's just Isaac from Sarah and Abraham. Now, Abraham will have other kids. He has Ishmael already. We'll see when he gets married to Keturah. Yeah, he gets married again, if you didn't know that. He has more kids, including Midian, who becomes the father of the Midianites. But then the next generation, Isaac, as we see, he'll have two sons, Jacob and Esau, just two. But then Jacob will have 12 sons. So the possibilities become more as the generations continue. But right now, it's just Isaac who's carrying the burden of the promise that a Messiah will come from this family. So let's get into text, chapter 24. Now Abraham was old. That's how it starts out with. He's old. Well advanced in years. Again, he's got to at least be 137. And the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh, that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. So this is an interesting beginning. This is how you make a swear to your master. It's a little goofy in our language, I think. And it's not that Abraham's a racist. That's not what's going on here. Why does he not want his son to marry one of the Canaanites? We will see it in the next generations as well. The Canaanites worship other gods. They sacrifice their kids to other gods. And while Abraham did make some friends with the Canaanites, as we saw from the last chapter, he does not want to have his son marry into those traditions that worship other gods and sacrifice your kids to false gods. You see what God did to Sodom and Gomorrah. You see what happened to Lot when he moved his lot to the Canaanites of the Sodom and Gomorrites. It didn't go well. So, Abraham, verse 4, but you will go to my country and my kindred and take a wife for my son Isaac. Now, so people bring up the can of worms, so Abraham's intermarrying, he wants his son to intermarry with his own family. So yeah, Isaac will be marrying a cousin. Doesn't God speak out against incest? Well, at this point in the world's history, if you remember, Abraham is only the 10th generation from Noah. So there weren't a lot of people who lived in the world, and people did marry their cousins back then, and the genetic malfunctions hadn't spread so much then. God actually makes the law of not marrying within your close family around Exodus, so 400 years after this, because he knows not just that it's weird, because it wasn't weird back then. Adam and Eve, mean, and then their kids had to marry each other. That's the way it was when you start from the beginning. We were at the beginning, so we don't know what it was like, okay? So it's just, we will never understand that then. But now, obviously, we don't marry close to our relatives. And there's definitely science or genetic reasons for not doing that. And that's why God does end it in Exodus, because there are a lot of people now, and the sin has caused malfunctions, not just in the world, with bad weather, but also with our genes. And the longer we live, I hate to say it, but we can get as much medicine and science as we want, there will be new malfunctions, new diseases, new cancers, new all kinds of stuff. It's just the way it is. And it's sad, but the good news is what God's doing, even back in this story. Getting a wife for Isaac is much greater of a deal than just getting a wife for Isaac. It's about getting a wife for Isaac so we can continue the next generation, to eventually bring forth God's Son, the Savior of the world, who will take care of all the bad weather and all the bad fallen stuff of the world and our sin and all the malfunctions of our DNA. So God sends, but Abraham sends his servants to go get a wife for Isaac from his country. So the servant says to him, perhaps the woman may not be willing to go and follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came? Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. This is a big deal. So the guy says, well, what if the woman, one of your brother's daughters, doesn't want to come back here? Then do I take Isaac there? He's like, no. And the reason is because God has promised this land to his offspring, not that land. And so this, again, is not about race or culture or property values, or is it better to live in LA or New York? This is about the promise. It's all about the promise. This is all theology. So the reason we got to get a wife for Isaac is about theology. And the reason you don't leave the land is about theology. God's made promises. And even when it doesn't look like he's going to keep them, when you're 137 years old and your wife is dead and your son's not married and you live with a bunch of Canaanites, you still trusted the promise. Get it? All right, verse 10. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at the time of evening, and a time when women go out to draw water. And he said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may have a drink, and who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. Okay, so the servant doesn't just go on his own, but he gets to the point where, okay, he's where he needs to be, and he does what all Middle Eastern people do back in that day. They go to the well. Why do you go to the well? Because that's where the people come out. That's where they exchange information. That was their newspaper, the well. That was their way of communicating. That was their internet back then. And the women would come out early in the morning to draw water, and then also when the sun went down in the early evening to draw water. And so he prays to the God of Abraham that Abraham's wishes for a wife would be made known. So he sort of puts a fleece out there. It says, as these women come out, the one who says not just to give me a drink, but water my camels, let her be the one. And before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, She came out with her jar of water on her shoulder. The young woman was very attractive in appearance, a maiden whom no man had known. That means she was a virgin in Hebrew. She went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please give me a little water to drink from your jar." And she said, "Drink, my lord." And she quickly let down her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. And when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking." So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for all the camels. The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing half a shekel, 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels, and he said, "Please tell me whose daughter you are. Is a room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." She added, "We have plenty of straw and fodder and room to spend the night." The man bowed his head and worshipped Yahweh the Lord and said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master. As for me, the Lord has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman." Then the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. So, Abraham's wish, his prayer, the servant's prayer all come true. Rebecca is the chosen daughter. God has ordained this to happen. And this has been a long journey. And on the first try, it happens, which is pretty cool. Now, many people make hay, many scholars who study the Bible and try to come up with these great ideas, which are not great at all. They'll say that this is one example of a well scene and that this is why the Bible's not true and some guy made it up, and they throw these well scenes in where people meet their wives. So in the next generation, Jacob, when he's fleeing Esau because he stole his brother's blessing, he ends up in the same place, and guess where he meets his wife? At a well. And guess where Moses meets his wife Zipporah? At a well. And they'll say, "Ha, see, you have all these duplicate scenes and somebody made that up." No, that would be like saying you're watching 5 different movies and people get into cars and stop and get gas. And they say, "Oh, look, all these duplicate scenes." This is what people did back then. They went to the well. Most people got their news and met their wives at the well. In fact, in Jesus' day, what does Jesus do one day? He goes to the well and he meets an adulteress. And he does that on purpose. The women aren't coming. And Jesus knows that she's going to be there. And that's why he goes to the Samaritan woman at the well, because he wants to meet her of all people, because he's come to seek sinners. So this is not some literary made up thing that some guy made up. This is the way the world worked. So we would expect many scenes to be about wells in the Old Testament because that's how the world worked. To me, it's actually more historical verifying that this is a true story. You would expect to have camels and donkeys going to wells and people meeting there to talk and to meet their future spouses. And that's what we have. It's sort of like after a global flood. You expect bad weather to happen. And what do we have in the Abraham story? We have famines. So, yeah, people say that the famines are duplicate stories made up by different authors strung together, and they're not really true. They're just legends. If you want to know, it's called Formgeschichte, Bev.
Okay.
And it's all a bunch of hocus pocus. People not reading the text theologically or historically, and trying to make up these things to sort of throw doubt on the historical veracity of the Bible. That's what it comes down to. It's an evolutionary view perspective of the Bible. There's no way they think that a Moses could have written all this. We believe Moses wrote it, not just because it does all flow well historically and make geographical, historical, all kinds of sense. But more than that, the rest of the Bible witnesses to the fact that Moses wrote this. And the Jewish history witnesses the fact that Moses wrote this. So Moses is the author. And to me, it's interesting. This is sort of a side, sort of fun note. It's interesting that picture Moses writing this story. He would have got this passed down from oral tradition. That's how they pass down stories. In fact, that's why there's lots of repetition in these stories. That's another key point. There is lots of repetition. So Abraham sort of tells the story to the servant. The servant then lives out the story. The servant prays. And then when he engages Rebecca, the story is all repeated. And then it's going to repeat it again. That's why this chapter is 67 verses long. It's very redundant. But that's how they tell the story, is they were very redundant in the storytelling so they could remember the story. Luckily, I don't preach like that, because then my sermons would be very redundant and long. But that's how they remembered it. So I can imagine Moses, he's known this story from oral tradition passed down from his forefathers. This is probably a story that they, made s'mores. The father of the story would tell the story to his grandkids. Let me tell you how Isaac got his wife. The story went like this. Abraham was really old, and they would tell the story. And then you memorize that story, and then you tell your kids that story. So the interesting thing to me is this is how Moses meets his wife, at a well, And so I can imagine as Moses writing this saying, I remember when I met Zipporah, at the well. So anyways, we'll move on, verse 29, and Rebecca, she had a brother whose name was Laban. Laban ran out toward the man. Laban becomes an interesting character, a lot like, well, we'll leave that for a different time. He runs out towards the man to the spring. As soon as he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister. Thus the man spoke to me. He went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. He said, come in, O blessed of Yahweh. Why do you stand outside? Key point here. Even though Abraham's family has split up, and Abraham has moved his family to Canaan, they were together, if you remember. Abraham didn't leave his family at first like they should have. He didn't leave until his father Terah had died. And it was probably 65, 70 years ago now. But in that time they were together, Abraham would have shared the promise to Nahor and Nahor to Laban. And so they know the name of Yahweh. It's very explicit in the text. So the word Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, in Hebrew is Yahweh. It's not just some Lord word, it's Yahweh. So Laban says, come in, O blessed of Yahweh. So we have Yahweh living up and out away from Abraham because they're part of Abraham's family. So the mission of God is working even in the Old Testament, even in what I would say institutionalized ways. So people hear, they believe, and then they worship. Oh, come in, blessed one of Yahweh. Why do you stand outside? For I prepared the house and a place for the camels. So the man came to the house and unharnessed the camels and gave straw and fodder to the camels. And there was water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. Then food was set before him to eat. And he said, I will not eat until I've said what I have to say. And Laban said, speak on. Now we get the redundancy of everything that's happened. So he's going to tell the whole story. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord Yahweh has greatly blessed my master, and he has become great. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male servants and female servants, camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old, and to him he has given all that he has. My master has made him swear, saying, you shall not take away from my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell, but you shall go to my father's house and to my clan and take a wife for my son. And I said to my master, perhaps the one will not follow me. But he said to me, the Lord before whom I have walked, he will send his angel with you and prosper your way, and you shall take a wife for my son and my clan and for my father's house. Then you'll be free from my oath when you come to my clan, and if they will not give her to you, you'll be free from my oath. So I came today to the spring and said, oh, Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, if now you are prospering the way that I go, Behold, I am standing by the spring of water. Let the virgin who comes out to draw water, to whom I shall say, please give me a little water for me to drink from your jar, and who will say to me, drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord Yahweh has appointed for my master's son. And behold, before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her water jar on her shoulder, and yada, yada, yada. I mean, she quickly lifts down her jar, she waters the camels. Then I ask, whose daughter are you? She says, daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, who Milcah bore to him. So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her arm. Then I bowed my head and worshipped Yahweh and blessed Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who led me by the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Now then, so we rehearsed all the history. My voice is starting to wane. Good thing I don't have to speak these stories. Well, not a good thing, but at the fire tonight at least, because I wouldn't have the voice to do it. It's a long story. Verse 49. Now then, if you're going to show steadfast love and faithfulness to my master, tell me. If not, tell me. Then I may return to the right hand or to the left. Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, this thing is from Yahweh. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord spoke. Now, people make hay about this. Oh, it's terrible. Like, Rebekah didn't even have a chance to she didn't have a choice in the matter, and they just give her away to some stranger. Well, that's not true again. If you say that, you just don't know culture. So Rebekah's the one who watered the camels. Rebekah's the one who took the nose ring. Rebekah's the one who took the bracelets. She's the one who was excited to bring back this guy at the fact that there was some man, I hesitate to say young man because he's at least 37, and I think he was 40 when he took, he's 40, I think, when the boys are born. That's the next chapter. But in that day, men were older when they married their wives. It's the way it was. Because they would grow up and work the farm and get going and build some collateral so they could take care of them. As probably the way it was with Joseph and Mary too. I don't know if Joseph was 40 or 37, but he's probably mid-20s and Mary's probably 16. It's probably just the way it was. But people got engaged in this way. And let me tell you this. I know this is going to break your hearts. It was less about romance and love and more about working the farm and taking care of people. And I hate to break the news to you. There is romance, and God's all for that. Read the book of Song of Solomon. But even in our country, you'll go back in the 1800s, the 1900s, and I've sat at the feet of people who are now in heaven in this congregation who have told me stories about, didn't go to high school, but mom or dad had them work in the city in St. Louis as a nanny. And the money went to mom and dad who were farmers in Augusta or Defiance, which paid for them to hire workers who could work the land because they needed help with the land. And then, so-and-so would say, hey, my son is your daughter's age, or my son likes your daughter, let's talk. And that's how they did it even in America back in the pre-industrial age. So am I saying you shouldn't like the industrial age where we all go to college now or whatever, and we court on our own and date people? No, but the world didn't always act like that. And it's not a chauvinistic thing, and it's not the Bible's a bad thing either. This is the way the world worked. So, yes, Laban and Bethuel give their sister away, but she, I think, wants to, well, let's keep reading on, right? We got a few minutes. Verse 52. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the earth before Yahweh, and the servant brought jewelry of silver and gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. So Rebekah's getting some nice prizes. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. And he and the men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. When they arose in the morning, he said, send me away to my master. Her brother and mother said, let the young one remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that she may go. But he said to them, do not delay me, since the Lord Yahweh has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master. They said, let us call the young woman and ask her. So Rebekah does have a say in this. If Rebekah didn't want to go at all, I'm sure they would have said, you're weird and we don't want our daughter to go with you. No, Rebecca is excited about this new journey and about marrying a guy. And so they asked Rebecca, verse 58. They call Rebecca and say, will you go with this man? And she says, I will go. So they sent away Rebecca, their sister, and her nurse. So you get assigned a nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebecca and said to her, our sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him. Then Rebekah and her young women arose and rode on the camels and followed the man. Thus the servant took Rebekah and went his way. So it's not just Rebekah going. A nurse is going and other young women are going. So some of her friends and people who grew up with her. And again, this is not about slavery like we would think about it in a bad way. This is about how they took care of people. So Bethuel and Laban, they own a lot of land and they employ a lot of people. And that's what this is showing. Just like Abraham employed like 218 men, not counting the women. So when they say male servants and men servants, it's not like this harsh slavery system. I'm sure the people could come and go as they pleased. But if you want to get paid and you want to eat, you find a job. And if you don't own land or own cattle like Abraham did, then you got to find somebody. How's you gonna eat? That's what it comes down to. So so they're sending Rebecca, and they send with her some of her friends. And so Abraham is now going to inherit a daughter-in-law, Isaac a wife, and now Isaac will have female servants, but they're not like slaves. They're Rebecca's friends, and they're going to help take care of the house, and they're going to help take care of Rebecca, and they're friends with her, and they're going to get paid or fed or whatever. It's a good deal back then. Verse 62. Now Isaac had returned from Beer Lahai Roi, which is interesting. That's where, so Beer is the Hebrew word for well. So meaning at the well, Beer is well. Beer Sheba, you probably remember Beer Sheba, that's well of the oath. And Beer Lahai Roi, this is where Ishmael and Hagar saw the angel of the Lord. And so Lahai Roi means some effect of this is where I saw God. So this is the well of where I saw God. Anyways, that's where Isaac is now dwelling in the Negev. So it's a dry, arid region, and that's why they need wells in the dry, arid region. So if you're not in the dry, arid region, if you have streams or if you have rivers, you can water your flock that way, but they don't in the Negev, so they dig wells. Again, this all makes sense. This is historical geography type of things. It's great that we have real earthy, ancient culture happening historically. Verse 63, Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening. He lifted up his eyes and he saw, and behold, there were camels coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel and said to the servant, who is that man walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, so she took her veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah his mother and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So there's not like this big engagement scene. He pretty much marries her, boom, like that. And we don't know if there's a big ceremony. Not sure if, they had a big meal, but they pretty much got married as soon as they met. And so she veils herself, and they have the wedding ceremony. And Isaac is comforted at his mother's death. That's how the story ends. So it connects well to the real historical stuff that's going on in the family. His mom died. We got now a wife, and now we're sort of transitioning out of Abraham and into Isaac. Doesn't get much print. I mean, he gets this much print in the book of Genesis. Abraham gets this much, and then Jacob gets this much, but Isaac just this much. So next week we will continue chapter 25 with the the rest of Abraham's life, and then the birth of Esau and Jacob, the twins. So thanks for joining us today, and may God bless your day. Good morning, Chapel Cross, and all who are gathering.